sa gnoma velen va ilemate, va susretanu sarasala bili druga vela lalume, na unkve, lona va unkve obrazanu na visha eterika silaya.
In a place where epic expanses intertwine with scientific imagination, we'll encounter races from other planets, both good and evil, and peer into the higher etheric energies that permeate our material universe. The crystal gate screamed. It was not a sound transmitted through airwaves in physical space, but a painful resonance of the ether itself, a pervasive vibration that for a single moment silenced the breathing of Sylvaeron, halting even the quietest whispers of light. The veil, that fine membrane which for cycles had guarded the boundaries of reality, separating the known from the unimaginable, had been torn asunder. This was no harmless thinning that occasionally allowed the return of travelers from distant etheric journeys, nor a minor fissure that the elders could easily seal with wisdom and knowledge. No, these were scars upon the very face of existence, grand gaping wounds, opening as if the universe itself were bleeding, pouring out a dark, unknown force. Through these wounds, now eerily named the Rifts of Veles, silhouettes began to spill uninvited and menacing from the very depths of non-existence. They were not etheric and gentle like the echoes of distant thoughts that the Sylvaerons exchanged in their mental weaving, nor bright and melodic like the ancient travelers who brought stories of stars and distant worlds. These were entities of twisted light and shadow, distorted manifestations of nothingness itself, anti-life in its most terrifying form. Their forms were higher etheric, fluid and undefined, constantly reshaping themselves in the eyes of the observer, pulsating, malevolent masses imbued with a malignant red energy that flickered like an extinguished star, heralds of destruction and absolute erasure. Sometimes, in their depths, terrifying hints appeared of something resembling vortices of pure desolation, a void that sucked in light and the very concept of existence. They did not move in a conventional sense, neither walking nor hovering, but flowed, spilled, and rippled from the rifts in the fabric of the universe, with an intent that was neither good nor evil, but pure, insatiable, primal hunger, a hunger for resonance, for the very life spark, for the essence of existence which the Sylvaerons possessed so abundantly, and which served as the only source of food for the entities of the void. Ilara, whose presence pulsed in complex patterns near the crystal gates, was the first to receive the full impact of their disharmonious resonance. His higher etheric suit, with its iridescent shades of aquamarine and turquoise, which gently pulsed with the inner light of his essence, vibrated uneasily, like a string on the verge of snapping, unable to fully cushion the intrusion of the threatening energy. Pain surged through his mind, sharper than any physical blow, for he felt the very chaos and destruction the entities carried in their essence. Their presence was not a call for interaction or the exchange of knowledge. It was an invasion of existence, a breakthrough into the very core of Sylvaeron, with the goal of total annihilation. Behind him, Lysandra, whose aura usually radiated serenity and ancient wisdom, and the elders of the Luminiferous Flow Academy froze, their faces paling before the sight unfolding. The crystal gates had become a portal of chaos. Previously, the veil had only thinned, hinting at distant dangers that could be understood and controlled. But now it was wide open, distorted, like the maw of an ancient beast devouring reality itself, threatening to extinguish all light. Panic began to spread through the ether, a feeling the Sylvaerons rarely experienced, for they were usually masters of their emotions and etheric currents. But this threat was different. It was existential, targeting their very essence, the very fabric of their being. "It is not like the first crossing," exclaimed Eldrin, the oldest elder, his usually calm voice laced with shock and disbelief. His ancient eyes, which had seen countless cycles of existence and dangers beyond the material world, were now filled with pure horror, a reflection of the realization of something that transcended all their prophecies. These are entities of the void. They do not seek passage, but prey. They target the very essence of life, to consume it until the last vibration, until absolute erasure from existence. His words spread through the mental network of the Sylvaerons, carrying the cold chill of realization, resonating with their deepest fears. They did not have to wait long for confirmation of those terrible words. The entities moved with eerie silence, their amorphous forms spilling across the shimmering crystal plates of the hall, penetrating the very air of Sylvaeon, as if darkness itself were expanding. The resonance they emitted was like a chisel scraping against the soul, attempting to shatter the mental stability of the Sylvaerons, to destroy them from within before even touching them. The air became heavy with their presence, filled with distorted echoes of the etheric void, a sensation of cold that pierced to the core of every being. The peace of Sylvaeon, which had lasted for cycles, was shattered by a brutal, inexplicable force that threatened to quench their entire world. The moment of paralysis, shock, and horror was broken by the heroes of Sylvaeron, Kael, whose form now consisted of fluid, iridescent contours of energy, a reflection of his dynamic and powerful essence. Lightning fast, manifested his primary higher etheric weapon, the etheric destabilizer. It was not an object of matter, but a brilliant, irregular form of pure thought and will, capable of shattering etheric bonds and concepts. His energy flared a flame of aquamarine and turquoise, mirroring his suit, illuminating the hall and forcing the shadows to retreat before the onslaught of his will. He was the first to counterattack, before fear could take root deep in the hearts of the defenders and paralyze them. His move was like a spark, igniting a fire of hope amidst the twilight, reminding the others of their inner strength. Warriors, to the defense of Sylvaeron, give them not a shred of our essence, thundered Kale's mental voice, resonating in the minds of all present, not merely as a command, but as an injection of fearlessness, a call for collective courage and unity. His destabilizer tore into the nearest amorphous mass of the entity, which pulsed with the most intense red energy, like the malevolent heart of nothingness itself. With a burst of energy, the entity temporarily dispersed, leaving behind only unstable flickering particles that soon vanished like smoke in the wind. A moment of relief flowed through the ranks of the defenders, but it was quickly replaced by the realization that this was only the beginning of an endless conflict, where every dispersed entity was merely a temporary victory. Among the heroes was also Ileana, a tall and graceful Sylvaeron, whose strength lay in her ability to manipulate dense etheric energy and shape it to her will. Her mind was a bastion of concentration, her will as unyielding as ancient mountains. She manifested an energy shield, a transparent, pulsating barrier that defied the laws of Sylvaeon's physical world, attempting to repel the attacking entities. Her shield expanded, encompassing groups of Sylvaerons, absorbing the impacts of twisted energy and transforming them into flashes of light, as if she were absorbing the darkness itself. The shield pulsed in the rhythm of her heart, reflecting her unshakable will and fierce, protective nature, motionless in the vortex of chaos. Beside her stood hundreds of other Sylvaerons, clad in similar higher etheric suits, ready to defend their home, their planet, and the very essence of their existence. Each of them, by mental will, manifested various weapons, brilliant energy projectors, firing beams of pure light, piercing the amorphous forms of the entities with power drawn from their souls. Others created fluid deflectors that changed shape as needed, bending and reshaping into etheric blades or protective shells. Third ones launched pulsating resonance bombs that shattered the etheric structure of anything they touched. All their weapons were unique, immaterial in essence, woven from thought and will, but devastatingly effective against the etheric threat. The defense was established, heroic and fierce, but the battle had only begun to flare in its full intensity. But for every entity that dispersed into etheric dust, under the Sylvaeron's strikes, 2 new ones appeared from the rifts of Veles, like an unstoppable, twisted tide of the void. Their numbers were terrifying, infinite in their monstrosity, and their method of attack was eerie in its subtlety. They did not rely on physical force, on blows or blades that would tear tissue and bone. Their weapon was a penetrating, draining, a silent, invisible quenching of life, a primal hunger that left only emptiness. The air of the hall of the crystal gates trembled from their disharmonious resonance, creating a sense of pressure upon the very etheric substance of Sylvaeron, as if space itself were suffocating, threatening to extinguish all light. Ilara watched with horror and internal pain as the battle unfolded, feeling every loss as a blow to his own essence, as if part of his soul were being torn away, leaving behind a gaping void. He saw a young Sylvaeron, a warrior of brave heart named Leon, whose aura pulsed with vitality and untapped potential, being enveloped by an amorphous, murky shadow imbued with malevolent red light. Leon tried to defend himself, his higher etheric weapon pulsing with desperate energy, shining with green and gold iridescence as he fought to shake off the invisible grip. But the etheric entity penetrated through his defense, unstoppable as a shadow spreading under the skin, like the cold breath of death that steals the breath away. The sudden weakening of the internal light of the enveloped warrior was a ghastly sight, a scene etched into the soul of every Sylvaeron who mentally witnessed it. His life spark, that inner essence that made a Sylvaeron, began to shrink and fade, like the light of a dying forest, butterfly's last dance, gentle and ephemeral, vanishing into eternity. Ilara felt the emptiness spreading from Leon, a vibration of vanishing that echoed through the ether, threatening to swallow all that remained, spreading the contagion of nothingness. Leon screamed, but it was not the sound of physical agony known to the Sylvaerons, nor the cry of a warrior struck by a material weapon. It was a sob of the soul, a cry of an essence disintegrating, vanishing from existence into absolute nothingness. His eyes, once full of life and ancient wisdom, were now empty and dull, reflecting the horror of absolute void, the end of all that is known. His higher etheric suit, with its iridescent shades of aquamarine and turquoise, shriveled around him, losing its inner light, becoming a dark, lifeless husk, enveloped in an etheric cold that pierced to the core. And then, with a final jerk, the warrior's body began to decompose. It did not turn into dust or ash, nor into any material substance, but into transparent, shimmering particles that scattered into the ether, vanishing without a trace, without any mark. Neither body, nor soul, nor memory remained in the physical world. Only emptiness and a sense of cold silence, left behind an emptiness that hurt more than any wound, for it meant that life was forever erased from the fabric of existence. This was not the death they knew. It was an erasure from existence, an absolute end that threatened to befall everyone. Losses mounted with every wave of entities, leaving behind cold, etheric voids that constricted the collective consciousness of Sylvaeon, as if part of their essence were being extinguished. The brave Sylvaerons fought with unprecedented will, their determination unbroken, but the enemy was elusive, too numerous, too etheric. The higher etheric weapons of the Sylvaeron warriors and the defensive barriers slowed the advance of the entities, creating temporary gaps in their ranks. But they could not stop them entirely. With every fallen warrior, the collective resonance of Sylvaeon weakened, and that fall was like the opening of new, smaller cracks in the veil, opening an even wider path for the entry of entities from the rifts of Veles. A sense of hopelessness began to creep in, cold as the etheric darkness from the void, threatening to freeze even the last rays of hope, to suffocate all life. The energy of the Sylvaerons began to visibly decline, exhausted by the constant need to mentally manifest weapons and maintain etheric barriers. Every movement, every defensive maneuver required increasing concentration, draining the stores of vital essence the Sylvaerons had guarded for cycles. Every repelled entity came at an even higher price, as if the air itself were becoming heavier and the light dimmer, threatening to go out. Lysandra approached Elara, her face taut with exhaustion and worry, but with a flame of determination smoldering deep in her etheric eyes. She felt the collective pressure, the mental burden of her community that threatened to crush them. Guardians, the time has come. We cannot do this alone. Their hunger is too great. Our strength is failing, and the cracks in our defense are becoming too large to be closed by will alone. Her mental voice, usually melodic and full of light, was now imbued with sharp, unyielding resolve, a reflection of the realization that they had reached a point of no return, that every moment was precious. Elara nodded, feeling the weight of her words in his own essence, as if they were being carved directly into his being, becoming part of his essence. He knew that summoning the Guardians was a risky move, almost a precedent in their history, an act that could disrupt the delicate balance of the ether beyond what they could foresee. But he had seen the erasure of his companions. He felt the life of Sylvaeon slowly withering. He heard the mental sobs of vanishing souls echoing through the collective consciousness, filling it with sorrow and fear. There was no other choice. The alternative was absolute destruction, the silence of the infinite void that would swallow all that had ever existed, erasing Sylvaeon from the map of the universe. Elders, prepare the ritual of summoning. Invoke the Guardians. Now, Lysandra's mental voice permeated the hall, resonating with a power that defied chaos, cutting through the noise of etheric conflicts and the piercing vibrations of the entities. Her presence was an anchor amidst the storm, giving strength to others who wavered, reminding them of the purpose of their struggle. Several elders joined Elara and Lysandra at the heart of the crystal gates. The etheric storm raged around them, pulsating with the threatening red light of the entities, which illuminated their strained faces, but their will was unshakable, strengthened by the power of spirit and cycles of training. They gathered in a circle, overwhelmed by a sense of urgency, but also an ancient responsibility to the generations that preceded them and those yet to come. Their higher etheric suits shimmered under the strain, as if the very fibers of light were tearing under the pressure as they aligned their internal vibrations with the cosmic rhythm. They began to recite ancient incantations, words of power that had not been spoken for millions of cycles, but were etched in the etheric memory of the race. They aligned their etheric frequencies with the weaving of the universe, opening a window to the higher etheric energy, where the guardians reside, a window that demanded all their concentration and vital essence. Each word was a thread of light stretching through the chaos, creating a bridge of resonance to the silent void between worlds, to the place where the guardians waited. The air in the hall began to vibrate more intensely, not just from the presence of the void entities and their disharmonious frequencies, but also from the accumulated energy of the summoning. Tiny sparks of etheric light began to dance around the elders, circling and intensifying into miniature etheric vortices, while their mental wills focused on a distant resonance, calling for the higher etheric force that could save everything. The summoning was dangerously exhausting. Every moment of concentration drew away a portion of their life essence. Every incantation left behind an etheric fatigue that pierced to the core of their being, but they knew it was the only way, their last chance to survive. The call was sent, piercing through the noise of chaos and despair, traveling through dimensional membranes toward the unknown. They waited. Moments turned into eternity, each long as a cycle of the planet, filled with trepidation. The attack of the entities grew even fiercer, their amorphous forms pressing against the defenses with unstoppable force, and the ranks of the Sylvaerons visibly thinned, their energy at an end. Every individual Sylvaeron felt the burden of this anticipation. The collective breath of Sylvaneon was held in uncertainty, in fear of the approaching end. Hope flickered dangerously, thin as a thread of light in endless darkness, threatening to go out, leaving Sylvaneon in total darkness. In that continuous conflict, when it seemed all would be lost, a change was suddenly felt in the etheric flow. But it was not a wave of salvation, but a new phase of agony, a final effort before total collapse. The call to the Guardians had been sent in the information, but the answer was not instantaneous, and every flash seemed like an immeasurable etheric cycle filled with rising horror that overwhelmed Sylvaeon. The energy of the Hall of the Crystal Gates, once filled with light and serenity, now vibrated on the edge of collapse, emitting muffled, etheric sounds of agony and despair. The elders, including Eldrin, Lysandra, and Alara, stood firm by the crystal gates, their minds focused on the ritual of summoning, exhausted to the limit of endurance. But they were not only summoning, simultaneously, they projected powerful mental barriers, abstract walls of pure will and etheric density, trying to contain the onslaught of entities while waiting for the response. These barriers were not static. They pulsed with the rhythm of the collective effort, flickering under the invisible but devastating pressure of the void, as if the higher etheric energies themselves were bending under their weight. Yet, the entities were relentless. Their amorphous masses, imbued with malevolent red energy, surged in ever denser waves, threatening to overwhelm all, to swallow even the last ray of light. The resonance they emitted was not just painful. It was designed to destroy the very etheric integrity of the Sylvaerons, to shatter their mental structure and open them for the draining of their essence. Every attempt at breakthrough was felt as a sharp blow to the collective consciousness of the planet, followed by an eerie, cold intrusion that pierced to the core of their being. Mental fatigue began to creep in, insidious and draining, tightening the minds of the Sylvaerons like an invisible hoop. It was not just the bodies of the Sylvaerons that were at their end. Their minds, instruments of their power and essence, were overloaded, close to the point of collapse, before the very abyss. Concentration became harder, visions began to blur, and fear manifested as a cold, etheric chill that pierced every warrior, paralyzing the will and threatening to extinguish even the last spark of hope. On the front lines, Kael and Ileana, with their fluid forms and higher etheric suits in shades of aquamarine and turquoise, provided a super Sylvaeron resistance, their courage the only bulwark against despair. Kael's etheric destabilizer cut through the forms, leaving behind flickering trails of etheric destruction, but also a heavy void in the air, while Ileana's transparent shield shone with final efforts, absorbing surges of malevolent red energy, which caused it to pulse ever weaker, losing its inner light. Even they felt an increasing burden, a pressure that threatened to break them, to melt them into nothing. A sense of imminent catastrophe hung in the air, heavy and palpable, like an etheric fog descending on Sylvaeon, threatening to suffocate all life. They knew their strength, however great, was not infinite. The number of entities was unmeasurable, and every dispersed entity only opened the path for more new ones, forming from etheric rifts in the distance, as if the void were birthing them without end, from the very depths of non-existence. At that moment, when the strength of all Sylvaerons was reaching its ultimate limit and their collective hope hung by a thread, one of the mental barriers held by the elders flickered. Eldrin's expression, usually calm and composed, now showed strain, bordering on physical pain. Tiny etheric cracks appeared around his eyes, softly shimmering a sign of the overload of his ancient mind. The barrier held for only a moment longer, struggling to maintain its form, and then gave way with a silent but devastating etheric burst that was felt in every Sylvaeron's essence, as if a part of their soul were torn out. Through the newly formed breach, 3 amorphous forms of entities penetrated, surging through space with terrifying speed, directly toward the heart of the defense, toward the unprotected warriors. One pounced on the young Sylvaeron female, Lana, whose life spark, brilliant and full of potential, began to fade before the eyes of her comrades, her aura suddenly extinguishing, as if the light of her being were being quenched. Her scream, a cry of a vanishing essence, echoed through the mental links of the Sylvaerons, conveying the horror of her erasure, weakening the already strained defense. Ilara felt the dull thud of loss in his own etheric form, as if part of his soul were ripped out and coldness spread through his essence, filling him with a sense of emptiness. A moment later, Lana's higher etheric suit shriveled, and her body scattered into shimmering particles as had happened before, leaving behind only an echo of emptiness and nothingness. The second entity moved, lightning fast toward Eldrin, the oldest elder, whose concentration was at an end, struggling to hold the remaining barriers. However, before it arrived, Lysandra directed a portion of her vital energy, temporarily strengthening Eldrin's barrier, protecting him from a direct blow and allowing him to catch his breath. Yet, the third entity, the fastest and most imbued with malevolent red energy, bypassed the defense and pounced on another young Sylvaeron, Alar, whose defense was too exhausted. Alar's brilliant etheric projector went out, and his suit began to darken, losing its luster. He too vanished in a cloud of shimmering particles, and the ether once again ached from the emptiness, a sensation that threatened to completely crush them, to push them over the edge of total despair. Panic threatened to overwhelm the defenders. They had lost 2 more of their own, 2 parts of the collective soul of Sylvaeon in just that brief, fatal breach. Strength was rapidly declining, and the sense of imminent doom was almost palpable, like a heavy burden descending upon their etheric shoulders. The evil entities began to penetrate deeper, their amorphous forms rippling through the hall, sensing the weakening of the resistance and spreading the cold embrace of the void. The crystal gates, the source of all the chaos, began to pulse even more intensely, as if laughing at the Sylvaerons' suffering, their resonance becoming a malevolent hymn of doom that threateningly echoed through the higher etheric energy itself, hinting at the final end. And then, the response, just at the moment when the last thread of hope began to fade, when the elders felt they could no longer bear the burden of collective will, and the warriors were preparing for a final, desperate resistance. A grandiose shift was felt in the very fabric of the higher etheric energy. It was not just a slight disturbance of the ether, but a monumental force that swept through the universe, announcing a change in the cosmic order. A powerful wave of energy, pure and ancient, surged through the crystal gates. It was not the chaos of the entities, nor the disharmonious vibration of the void, but an immeasurable, purifying power that cut through the malevolent resonance of the void, like a blade through silence, bringing an instantaneous end to the terror. The sky above Sylvaneon, which had been filled with the distorted light flashes of the rifts of Veles and the shadows of doom looming over, now parted, but not in rifts, in a grandiose etheric opening, as if the cosmos itself had dissolved to allow passage for what was coming, something transcendent. Through that monumental portal poured forms, massive and etheric, composed of the essence of energy itself, the primal force that guarded worlds. Their color was a luminous orange ochre, reflecting ancient power and a soothing yet terrifying presence that instilled awe and woke deep admiration. They were the guardians, ancient entities whose existence was tied to the balance of dimensions, and their arrival was a sign of extreme emergency. Their presence caused a wave of awe and hope, briefly banishing despair from the hearts of the Sylvaerons, giving them much-needed strength. It was as if the collective breath of the planet was held in a moment of realization, then released in a sigh of deep relief that brought a sense of salvation. The evil entities retreated for a moment, as if surprised by the arrival of powerful entities whose resonance they did not recognize. Their amorphous forms, until then unstoppable in their advance, trembled and wavered as if faced with something unimaginable, a force that transcended their understanding and the very nature of their existence. The battle briefly quieted. The tension in the air became palpable before flaring up again with even greater strength. For the primal hunger of the void could not be easily silenced, nor their nature suppressed completely, but only temporarily pushed back. The guardians immediately joined the conflict, moving with a grandiose grace that stood in contrast to the chaos ruling the hall. They stood shoulder to shoulder with the Sylvaerons, emitting fields of protection that spread like invisible walls, pushing back the malevolent red energy of the entities and defending all before them. These shields were not like those manifested by the Sylvaerons' transparent pulsating barriers of will that strained under pressure. The shields of the Guardians were fundamental, woven from primal etheric essence, nearly impenetrable, and did not weaken under pressure, but seemed invulnerable. Simultaneously, they projected powerful beams of pure energy, strong, purifying rays, illuminating the darkness. Those light orange ochre rays, sent by the will of the Guardians alone, struck the etheric forms of the entities, causing painful resonance waves that forced the entities into brief withdrawal, and sometimes into fragmentation that lasted longer than usual, giving the Sylvaerons a much-needed respite and an opportunity to reorganize. The power of the Guardians was obvious and overwhelming, but it was still a fight against too many entities, an inexhaustible source of the void which continuously welled up. The battle, though now more balanced, continued on the surface of Sylvaeon with new hope and intensified strength. The crystal halls and etheric landscapes of the planet became the scene of an unprecedented conflict, where energies collided in a spectacle of light and shadow, fighting for survival. The sounds of energy collisions resonated through the ether, creating a complex but devastating symphony of war. Filled with pain and hope, the Sylvaerons, encouraged by the presence of the Guardians, found strength again. Their higher etheric suits, once again, shining with full brilliance, illuminating the hall. Kale's etheric destabilizer cut through the pulsating masses of entities with renewed strength, while Ileana's shield shone with a new, restored glow, vibrating with the strength of the Guardians, repelling every attack. However, in the background of that magnificent but exhausting struggle, Ilara and Lysandra realized that merely repelling the attacks was not enough. The Guardians provided invaluable defense and gave them a vital respite, but they were not the solution for destroying the rifts of Veles, nor for the permanent elimination of the entities. This was a battle for existence itself, and it required more than mere strength. It required genius and sacrifice. While the battle raged on the surface of Sylvaeon, with energies colliding in a spectacle of light and shadow, the thoughts of Ilara and Lysandra moved toward a solution that went beyond mere defense. They saw that this struggle could not be won by strength alone, however monumental the power of the Guardians might be, but by cunning a strategy that would outwit the very nature of the void and turn it against itself. Too many Sylvaerons were vanishing into nothingness, and every lost life left an indelible etheric void in the collective consciousness of the planet, a painful scar that could not be healed, a permanent warning. Ilara felt that pain within himself. Every erasure echoed in his sharpened etheric perception as a deep, resonant sadness, almost physical pain that pierced to the core of his being. Ilara realized that this was a battle that transcended the material frameworks of their world. It could not be won merely by mental manifestation in the physical world, nor by just pushing the enemy away. They had to fight in the spheres where the entities came from, in their very etheric expanse, in their essence, where they were most vulnerable. But how to lure them there when the planet itself was under siege, and every moment meant a new erasure of life? The answer had to be found quickly, before Sylvaeron was completely ravaged, before it was swallowed by the final silence, erasing it from existence. His thoughts raced in the information, seeking a solution in the ancient texts of the Etheric books and forgotten resonances, searching for long-hidden knowledge, while around him he felt the fabric of reality tearing under the pressure of the void. The air was saturated with the scent of etheric destruction, a sense of cold fear that crept into every pore of his being, threatening to freeze his very will, to paralyze it. As despair spread among the defenders, though hope flickered again thanks to the guardians, Lysandra approached Alara, her face taut with fatigue and worry, but with a flame of determination in her etheric eyes that did not fade, but shone brighter than ever. Guardians and elders, we must act together. Their hunger is too great to just keep repelling them. We must direct them. We must deceive them. Lure them where they cannot harm our world, where we will be able to stop them forever. Her mental voice was imbued with sharp but unyielding resolve. There was no time for hesitation, only for action, for the implementation of a plan that was nearly unimaginable. Alara nodded, accepting the burden of her wisdom. He knew it was a risky move, that a wrong step could seal Sylvaeon's fate forever, handing it over to nothingness. But he had seen the erasure of his companions. He felt the life of Sylvaeron slowly withering. He heard the mental sobs of vanishing souls. There was no other choice. The alternative was not absolute destruction, the silence of the infinite void that would swallow all that ever existed. The plan had to be cunning, inspired by the very nature of the etheric threat, a trap woven of deception and light, where the enemy would face themselves and their insatiable hunger. In the hall of the Crystal Gate, under the protection of monumental energy shields projected by the Guardians, the strategy was rapidly being developed. Those shields, pulsating with luminous orange ochre energy, provided a temporary, sacred space within the chaos, allowing the elders to focus their collective minds without disturbance, without the intrusion of the void. The elders of the Luminiferous Flow Academy gathered around Lysandra and Alara, projected thoughts into a shared mental space, forming a network of collective intelligence that worked as a single mind, joined for the purpose of survival. The solution had to be so perfidious that it used the very hunger of the void entities against them, turning them into their own trap. They are hungry for resonance, not territory or matter, began Eldrin, the oldest elder, his voice now imbued with urgent but calm wisdom, drawn from thousands of cycles of experience and knowledge of cosmic laws. Their perception of the world is distorted, driven by the primary urge to drain the life spark, the essence of existence. We are their richest source. We can use that against them, turn their hunger to our advantage. The eyes of the elders, deep and ancient, shone with focused energy, clearly seeing the path to salvation. Lysandra continued, her words spilling through the mental space like rivers of light, crystallizing the idea with unyielding precision. If we create an illusion of a massive, desperate escape, they will follow the resonance. They will have to believe that all beings are leaving Sylvaeron, that all life's spark is moving into the higher, etheric energy, to a place where they expect an unlimited prey, an endless feast of souls. Her plan was daring, almost unimaginable in its boldness, balancing on the edge of genius and madness. But in that situation, madness was the only logic, the only hope. The plan quickly took shape, developed in simultaneous mental projections that acted faster than any speech. It was decided that several million of the most capable Sylvaerons, fighters, soldiers, and heroes, masters of energy, manipulation, and mental abilities, those whose etheric control was the most precise and strongest, would enter the higher etheric energy, but not as fighters in open conflict. Their entry would be a concealed trap, a subtle signal, an irresistible bait. Simultaneously, they would manifest a vast number of higher etheric ships, star dancers, and other Sylvaerons, creating a visual and etheric impression that the entire population of Sylvaeon was frantically retreating into the higher etheric energy in a hopeless attempt to avoid destruction and survive. Those phantom ships were not mere illusions. They pulsed with a specific, powerful resonance, an etheric echo of life, simulating billions of souls desperately fleeing from danger, whose cry was an irresistible call for the entities. The goal was for the evil entities to feel the presence of billions of life sparks as they moved, like nectar luring them, promising an endless feast in the higher etheric energy, where their doom would wait. While this massive illusion unfolded, all other Sylvaerons on the planet would hide behind their protective abilities, entering a state of absolute etheric silence. Every trace of their presence would be hidden as if they did not exist, so that the evil entities would not feel the presence of a single living being on planet Sylvaeon. All hidden Sylvaerons would retreat into the deepest crystal caves, into the etheric rifts of the planet, becoming invisible even to the finest etheric perception of the void entities, merging with the very essence of the planet. The masters of etheric camouflage worked with unprecedented precision, erasing every resonance, every mental footprint, every smallest vibration of life, making the planet seem dead, deserted, and unattractive to the entities. The goal was for Sylvaeron to become an empty husk, unattractive to the entities, to force them to follow the false prey into the unknown, into the higher etheric energy that would trap and neutralize them forever. The Guardians agreed to provide support. Their powerful etheric influence would be key in stabilizing the portal to the higher etheric energy, ensuring the illusion of escape appeared as convincing and irresistible as possible. Their presence would amplify the magnetism of the false resonance, creating an irresistible bait for the void entities, like a lighthouse amidst the darkness luring them to their doom. Their massive, luminous orange ochre forms positioned themselves around the crystal gates, emitting fields of energy that vibrated with the very weaving of the higher etheric energy, concealing the true goal of the Sylvaerons and directing the flow of entities directly into the trap. Preparations began immediately, with a speed that was a reflection of despair and a precision that came from millennia of etheric understanding and discipline. Millions of Sylvaerons, those chosen for this critical mission, began mental manifestations. They did not create ships from matter, but from pure energy, shaping huge, luminous silhouettes of their star dancer vessels that looked as if they were rising from the surface of the planet, ready for the journey through the ether. These phantom ships were not just a visual trick. They pulsed with a specific resonance, an etheric echo of life, simulating billions of Sylvaerons frantically fleeing, giving the evil entities of the void the false hope of easy prey. They were followed by illusory processions of Sylvaerons, projected to look as if they were hurrying to board these gigantic forms, creating a picture of general exodus. Those false traces of life, those phantom waves of resonance, began to spread through the ether, heading toward the open portal, toward the higher etheric energy. The air became saturated with this deception, vibrating with the rhythm of the false, massive exodus, a rhythm that promised overabundance, irresistibly pulling the void entities behind it. The evil entities, driven by their insatiable hunger and the primal urge to drain the life spark, could not resist this perfect bait. They noticed this supposed massive migration like a flame in the dark, an irresistible scent of prey wafting through dimensions. Their amorphous forms, imbued with malevolent red energy pulsing even stronger with excitement, began to waver, losing focus on the direct conflict. Their attention, until then exclusively directed at the battle on the surface of Sylvaeron, shifted toward the promise of vast, easily accessible prey. Their only intention was to consume the life spark, and this massive resonance was nectar. They could not ignore an etheric call to a feast, such as they had never felt. When they felt the massive exodus of resonance, their collective minds driven by primitive urge, turned toward that irresistible source, the entities began to redirect their attacks, their forms lengthening and spilling over, striving for return into the higher etheric energy, following the phantom Sylvaerons who were fleeing into the void, believing the prey was within reach and the feast could begin. At that moment of redirection, the battle on the surface of Sylvaeon subsided in intensity. The pressure dropped sharply, giving a brief but precious respite to the weary Sylvaerons, whose breaths returned to normal. Although entities still emerged from the rifts of Veles, their flow was significantly reduced as primal hunger directed them toward the supposed prey, fleeing into the higher etheric energy, toward the heart of the trap. Relief flowed through the ranks of the defenders, but it was only a temporary lull before the decisive act. They knew this was a key moment. If the plan failed, they would not have another chance. Sylvaeon would be forever lost. The silence that fell over Sylvaeon was surreal, broken only by the quiet hum of the etheric resonances of the guardians and the distant pulsing of the remaining rifts. All Sylvaerons, hiding in the deepest caves and etheric rifts of the planet, maintained absolute mental silence, their suits merging with the crystal environment, becoming nearly invisible, as if they had completely integrated with the planet itself. Every thought, every emotion was muffled to non-existence, turning them into phantom voids, barely palpable even to their own essences. They waited with held breath, while the elders performed the final key part of the ritual. The fate of Sylvaeon was in their hands. When all the evil entities, deceived by the perfect illusion, found themselves in the higher etheric energy, the expanse of pure energies, the elders of the Luminiferous Flow Academy gathered in a circle around the crystal gates, directed their collective will, the power of billions of minds freed from direct physical conflict and focused on a single goal, flowed into a single monolithic etheric beam pulsating with power. Eldrin's hand, filled with etheric light, shining with ancient power and wisdom, rose, and Lysandra's gaze was focused with absolute, unyielding precision, reflecting the strength of their race. The guardians, in perfect synchronization, directed their gigantic luminous orange ochre auras toward the crystal gates, amplifying the etheric force of the elders to unheard of proportions, giving them a strength that crossed all boundaries. They forcefully closed the veil, raising it as an impassable barrier between dimensions, a wall of pure energy and will. The resonance of that closing was monumental, inaudible in the physical world, but palpable through the entire material dimension, like a cosmic thunderclap that echoed through the whole universe, announcing victory. The sky above Sylvaeon, which until then had been distorted by the rifts of Veles and eerie flashes of the entity's red energy, now began to close, healing the scars on the very face of existence. The flames of chaos retreated, the etheric fog of the void thinned, and the silence of the ether returned, deep and purifying, bringing with it a sense of serenity. It was a silence filled with sorrow for the unimaginable losses and the erasure of beloved beings, but also with a quiet, monumental victory, an echo of survival and triumph. Peace once again enveloped Sylvaeron, a peace that was fragile but immeasurably precious, like a gift from the very heart of the universe, promising a new beginning. After the closing of the veil, the guardians maintained their positions, emitting a gentle but powerful energy. Their massive forms slowly withdrew back through the portal through which they had come, while that portal also gradually closed, erasing the last traces of the battle. Before departing, the last of the guardians, whose form was the brightest and most imposing, sent a mental vibration to the elders, a message that echoed in their minds. The veil is sealed, but the void always seeks a path. Be vigilant, for your struggle is not finished, only relocated. The Sylvaerons slowly emerged from their hiding places, their higher etheric suits once again becoming alive, filled with iridescent shades of aquamarine and turquoise, radiating a renewed, though exhausted, energy. The hall of the Crystal Gate, once a scene of chaos and fear, now breathed with relief, although the pain of the losses remained deeply etched in the collective memory, a warning of the price of survival. The scent of pure ether was felt, without the taint of void, and the crystal plates once again shone with steady light, reflecting the return of harmony. The planet was safe. The battle for its existence on the material plane was concluded, but at an immeasurably great price. With the memory image of their vanished comrades, the Sylvaerons knew they had avoided total ruin, but also that they had faced a threat such as they had never before experienced. The scars on their collective soul were deep, but the realization of their resilience and unity was stronger than ever before. In the higher etheric energy, the trap closed. The Sylvaerons, who had entered that expanse, now in their true form, as warriors of the higher etheric energies, waited for the void entities. The higher etheric energy, now flooded with the light orange ochre colors of the guardians, whose influence still resonated with the aquamarine and turquoise shades of the Sylvaerons' higher etheric suits, became the scene of a higher etheric conflict that was just beginning a struggle that would define the fate of all existence. In that expanse of the higher etheric energy, where resonance collided with the void, where the fate of the universe would yet be decided, this story, through the rifts of Veles, ends with silence and a painful victory. Sylvaeron survived, but it was changed forever. The void touched their reality, leaving behind permanent scars and a realization of vulnerability, but also of incredible strength. but it also left a lesson in courage, unity, and the wisdom needed to face the unimaginable, to face nothingness itself. Spread the word about our civilization as far as possible to everyone you know, so that all may hear and discover the wonders of the Sylvaerons. For the more you know about us, the closer will be the moment of our arrival.